Counselor Blank.
Here.
Counselor Dowd.
Here.
Counselor Waterman.
Here.
Counselor Fisher.
Here.
Counselor Leftridge.
Present.
Counselor Nunnally.
Here.
Counselor Walker.
Here.
Mayor Hunter.
Here. We'll all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Mr. Waterman, will you read it?
Thank you, Your Honor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have our agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda, council minutes from January 26, 2026 meeting. Open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this consent agenda item, the council minutes, please step forward, state your name, or raise your hand if you're online.
Quick question of clarification. Did you say public comments on the agenda or?
On the consent agenda, yes.
Okay, all right, never mind.
Okay, seeing none, look to council for a motion.
Your Honor, I move the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Motion carries. We have one committee report this evening, Kalispell Tourism Business Improvement District.
Good evening. Diane Medler, Executive Director, Discover Kalispell and the Kalispell TBID. We are located at the Kalispell Chamber, 2 South Main Street. Tonight, I just wanted to provide a recap of our 2025 annual report. So we're going to give some highlights of our achievements, how we're performing financially, what our marketing is delivering, how we're focused strategically, and how visitors are engaging with our destination. And I always want to make clear that at our core, Discover Kalispell focuses on supporting the community. That means telling real and authentic stories about Kalispell, Montana way of life, and making sure those stories translate into customers walking through the doors of hotels and local businesses and contributing to a strong local economy. Visitors give us the resource to do this work. The taxes and fees they pay when staying in Kalispell hotels and short-term rentals are reinvested to drive travel during the slower seasons, attract group business and sporting events, and provide comprehensive visitor services. Visitors fund the work, but it's our shared community values that give it purpose and guide how we move forward. So creating a balanced tourism economy, we have our key pillars. It's destination marketing, business development, community stewardship, and visitor services. And they're all designed to create the positive image of Kalispell as a place to visit, live, work, and invest. And a lot of those start with a visit. Just some highlights from some 2025 travel trends and market conditions. We welcome the 107-room Home 2 Suites property to Kalispell and the TBID. The winter and shoulder seasons months showed increased visitations. Hotel occupancy recorded the largest increases in February and March and November and December. And Glacier Park's largest year-over-year growth in visitors was in January, March, April, May, and June. September declined 8.2%, which coincided with the vehicle reservation system, which remained in place through September 28th. Just a reminder, Glacier National Park's visitor numbers accounts for all people who visit the park, including residents. 2025 brought a significant decline in visits by Canadians, both here locally and across the U.S. According to U.S. Travel Association, Canada is projected to fall behind Mexico as the top U.S. inbound international market for the first time this century, which coincides with a decline in overall international inbound travel. Kalispell recorded a 36% decline in credit card spending by Canadians in 2025. So economic impact of visitor spending, non-resident visitors to Flathead County spend $850 million, which reaches far beyond hotels and restaurants. They spend heavily with outfitters and guides, grocery stores, local retail, to name a few. Credit card spending for Kalispell, 2025 showed an increase in spend in all merchant categories by domestic visitors, with restaurants leading with a 9% increase. Credit card spend by international, not surprisingly, decreased across all categories, lodging by 48% decrease and restaurants by 32% decrease. Lodging performance. Overall lodging performance was steady, modest growth for the year. Hotel occupancy saw no change year over year. ADR increased by 1%, average daily rate. RevPAR, which is revenue per available room, increased 1.8%, and total hotel revenue increased 3.1%. Kalispell short-term rentals saw a 3% growth in available listings with a similar increase in average daily rate. Financial overview. So for FY25, our actual revenue, you'll see that TBID is a large share of what the Discover Kalispell funds that we have to operate on. Actual revenue for TBID in FY25 was $1,027,000. The FY26 budgeted revenue, of which we're working with right now, TBID is $1.125 million, with bed tax being $234, I think that is. So, next slide. The group grants, our grant program, is a very important part of the TBID and a very important part to the TBID board. Through the grant program and attracting new sporting events and group events here, you can draw a direct line from the reinvestment of the TBID funds into hotel room night stays. So in 2025, the TBID granted $182,000 of financial assistance to support and expand local and community events that are occurring in 2025 and 2026. So a wide variety. Soccer, collegiate soccer with Grizz women's soccer team playing, hockey, Montana High School Rodeo Finals, the Spartan Race coming up, as well as other conferences, the Polar Bear International, which is a human bear conflict conference, which brought speakers from international speakers in. So it's just a short example of what we had sponsored. Marketing. Our marketing efforts focused on increasing engagement and conversions while expanding Kalispell's visibility and brand strength. So we use a mix of paid media, earned media, owned media, and social campaigns, seasonal campaigns to reach our target audience. So just I'll run through just a few highlights. Our Ski for Free in Montana. We're continuing that this year. It's running a little slower this year, no surprise, but starting to pick up a bit. Huckleberry Treat Trail encourages visitors to explore and spend at our partner restaurants, Kalispell restaurants. Summer road trip. We did this last spring and early summer, and we're certainly going to be boosting this campaign for this year based on our July weekday airport closure, really encouraging those road trips to Kalispell. The Rediscovering Kalispell campaign continue through 2025. So this is a way that we tell authentic stories and highlight local folks who provide a great experience for both residents and visitors. So some of the businesses we featured: Blacktail Mountain, Sacred Waters, Tour Glacier, Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation, DeSoto Grill, and Longview Lavender Farm. And the Kalispell Canadian Welcome Pass. So this is a community-driven campaign encouraging our neighbors to the north to come and visit. We actually are still getting good traction on it. This data is older. I think we're close to nearing 300 redemptions. A lot of the early redemptions were for hotel stays. There were 10 different hotels that are offering discounts on it. The other local businesses, such as retail and restaurants and activity providers, also offer discounts. It's a digital pass. that visiting Canadians can download and receive some discounts. It's just a simple way for us to say thank you for visiting. Public relations, we really shined this year. So we achieved over 2.6 billion in impressions. So earned media means, and the reach means the estimated number of people who had the opportunity to see stories about Kalispell in trusted media sources. So it's earned media, means it's not paid. We don't pay to put information about Kalispell in these publications. So Travel and Leisure, CBC, AOL, USA Today, CNN, Forbes, a long list of publications. We really got some great exposure for our little mountain town here. Visitor engagement, digital engagement was up, digital downloads of the visitor guide. Our visitor guide campaign, our paid media promoting it, did amazingly well with about almost just under 6 million impressions and 45,000 clicks to our website. Also web chats, people wanting to chat with the visitor center through web chat was up. Overall engagement with the visitor center was up 5%. So trends we're watching in 2026, 2026 is kind of the year of the international close sign. Canada and the US tensions remain a complex issue. There's the increased fees at national parks for international visitors. They buy at increased cost America the Beautiful Pass or pay $100 per person when they enter. Increased visa wait times and costs affecting several countries will continue the trend of the decline in international travel. The July weekday closure at Glacier Park International Airport, Monday 6 p.m. through Friday 10 a.m. It's unknown if airlines will increase capacity during the weekends. We have already started our messaging campaigns to travelers, telling them to book early, consider flying in and out of Missoula if they're coming in July. We're promoting, along with that messaging, we're promoting a road trip itinerary between Missoula and Kalispell, as well as between Great Falls and Kalispell and Spokane and Kalispell. I just want to get them here. We'll be promoting that summer road trip campaign. The good news is summer is also bringing some new flights. Delta will be flying direct to Austin, and American Airlines will be flying direct to Newark. We're definitely seeing an increased use of AI by travelers. How we search for information is changing, and AI results are driving the views. So people are looking for answers, not links in their search results. So instead of SEO, search engine optimization, you need to be working on GEO, new term to learn if you don't know it already. We'll welcome the opening of the 115-room Hyatt Studios up by Costco. We'll be hosting collegiate soccer events in April. We're very excited to have 3 different colleges coming and playing, and that'll be held at Legends Field. And as well as in August, we're playing, the Grizz will be playing, I think, 3 or 4 teams still to be decided. Very excited that the Montana Spartan Race is returning to the Flathead May 9th and 10th. Yeah, so that was a brief summary of our annual report. You can access the full annual report on our website. I encourage you to do so. Please reach out if you have any questions, and I'll see you again in the spring to present the FY27 work plan and budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Medler?
Actually,
Nunley.
yeah, I would just real quick. Last session, we saw an attack where they wanted to take money out of tourism and the bed tax. Have you heard, and it was successfully stopped, have you heard if they're planning a rehash of that?
We always anticipate it. It's a kind of an attractive pot of funds to pull from. You're right, the industry successfully defeated those last session. We are a very broad industry coalition in the state. We're already starting conversations, already doing outreach, helping them understand that first of all, that the Department of Commerce, due to a bill 2 sessions ago, is directing their use of the bed tax fund for promotion to rural and undervisited areas of the state. So, and there's a lot of grant programs that directly impact these smaller communities. So getting the word out on that and helping the legislators to understand the importance of that funds and not to take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Midler.
Thank you.
All right, now I'll open it up to public comment. This is time for any comment on items not on the agenda. Please step forward, state your name at the mic, or raise your hand if you're online.
All right, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, thank you for your time and service. My name is Gabe Merriman. I live on the east side of downtown Kalispell. I serve on the Kalispell Downtown Association Board, the KDA. I also serve on the KBID Board, the First Interstate Community Advisory Board, the Samaritan House Capital Campaign, the Montana Brewers Association, the Kalispell Chambers Affordable Child Care Initiative, and for fun, I operate a brewery on Main Street. I've served on the KDA board for 7 years. I've served on the KBID board for 4, and I've worked along amazing people to put on events, raise money for nonprofits, and collaborate with downtown businesses to promote community and vibrancy downtown. Downtown Kalispell has unique challenges and opportunities based on our growth, our small business economy, and our small business economy and I am not a public speaker, clearly. I am a public drinker. So the downtown Kalispell has these unique challenges. Over the past 10 years, we've seen a lot of change to business and community landscape. Over that same period, we've seen a lot of change to the KDA board, our executive leadership, and membership. The KDA has recently aligned with the Downtown Kalispell Forward Coalition, and our mission and leadership has been invigorated by the synergy and collaboration that we're seeing. The Downtown Kalispell Forward Coalition is a diverse group of downtown Kalispell stakeholders who seek to address our cultural, business, and infrastructure needs. This collaboration has brought a great opportunity for the KDA to come underneath the umbrella of the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce and operate as a committee by the Downtown Kalispell Forward Coalition. So what we're doing over the next coming weeks is we're going to actually dissolve the KDA. We're going to come underneath the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to operate under the Kalispell Downtown Forward Coalition. So we've reached out to the KDA founders, longtime members, and received support for this transition. I can speak for the KDA board members, myself, and others who will continue to do the work that supports downtown Kalispell. We're committed to doing the work. We're committed to better aligning with and serving the downtown stakeholders. We are going to change with the times. We're not going to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. This partnership makes a ton of sense. There has historically been a lot of crossover between the KDA and the chamber membership. We have similar goals. We ask the same business owners to join 2 organizations. We ask them to pay 2 separate fees. We double up on the cost to operate. That's labor, marketing, legal fees, bookkeeping services, etc. This realignment will make us more robust and more fiscally responsible. This type of merge is quite common in cities of our size, growth rate, and unique challenges. Both of our organizations are currently financially healthy, which is a good time to merge. We have tremendous synergy with the newly formed Downtown Kalispell Forward Coalition. We have a shared mission, we have shared challenges, we have shared stakeholders. I'm very excited to merge the KDA into the Kalispell Chamber and work with the Downtown Kalispell Forward Coalition to address the challenges and opportunities that face our historic downtown. This realignment gives us the best chance to bring vibrancy, build community, and affect positive change. I really thank you for your time and service, and I look forward to working with all of you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merriman.
Well, my name is Mark Shropshire. I live at 2390 North Mission Drive here in Kalispell, but I am not a citizen of the city of Kalispell. But I'm addressing an issue today that I think affects the whole county, and it began here in the city of Kalispell, and I'm talking about cooperation with ICE. What I'd like to do is I'd like to come back to my history. I've lived here for over 50 years, and talk to you about some things that I've experienced here in Kalispell that are pertinent to this issue. So in 1976, I was on a negotiating committee with the union, Retail Clerks Union. We negotiated the first and only cost of living increase ever. And we gained about 30% wages from $6 an hour to $9 an hour over a 3-year period of time. Never happened again. And there are reasons why. And I think a part of that is the fact that California was a dominant player in contract negotiations at the time. And there were a number of illegal aliens that were coming into the country at that time. It definitely affected our contract negotiations throughout the 1980s and into the 90s up until today. At the time, there were I think there were 5 or 6 retail clerks union stores here in Flathead County. We're down to 2. So what I'm encouraging is to consider the possibility that what illegal aliens and the influx of them in America today definitely affect us right here where we live. And so the inflationary tendencies that I've experienced in my lifetime. My first job was at a union store in Tacoma, Washington. I made $1.65 an hour. When I retired, I made $14.50 an hour. Now, I did a little bit of research and kind of tried to factor in taxes, inflation, and all the other cost expenditures that go into inflationary trends that reduce the buying power of every dollar every year. I made more money, in my opinion. Now, I'm not absolutely certain, and it varies which state you're coming from and here in Montana, but I made more money in 1969 in terms of what I could actually purchase with the money that I made than I made when I retired. And I contribute the influx of illegals into the United States generally, not necessarily here locally, because as far as I understand, there aren't a lot of illegals here in Flathead County. But it does affect our economy, it does affect our wages, and I just wanted to share that with you to give you an opportunity to maybe reconsider some of the choices that you've made. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Terry Solomon, and I live on First Avenue East. I came here tonight it's a sort of a micro issue compared to some of the ones you've heard, but to ask if there are some ways that the council might address traffic on First Avenue East. The speed limit is 25 miles an hour, but nowhere along First Avenue East is there a speed limit sign that says that. I'm not sure how effective one would be, but it's a long avenue. It seems like maybe one would be worthwhile. Last summer, after numerous complaints from people in my neighborhood about what happens on cruise night, the city put up an electronic speed sign that says, you know, you're going 45 miles an hour. We appreciated the effort, but none of us ever saw any enforcement of speeders, and they're rampant on First Avenue. We're coming up on the spring. Cruise night is going to come back. And our neighbors are planning to come back because even after we came and spoke a year and some months ago, it was worse last year than it ever was. So my very specific request is that the council consider putting a stop sign at First Avenue East and 8th Street, which is the north end of the little pocket park right by the courthouse. The reason being that there is no stop sign on First Avenue East between 11th Street and 4th Street. So what we have is a drag strip, because you've got that 7-block stretch where people never have to slow down. The other reason that that location would seem to be a very useful location is that when there is cruise night and the cars are going south down Main Street, then they make a left, most of them, at 11th Street. They come screaming up and blow through and turn onto 8th Street to get back on Main. And there's no stop sign there. And it is incredibly dangerous. And so I guess my request tonight is twofold. One, that you look at traffic calming measures for First Avenue in general. Stop signs, again, taking out the electronic signage. More importantly, posting some cops there to actually give tickets, not warnings. And I don't know, I read the police blotter and I see that lots of people get warnings for things. I've never been in a place where I get pulled over and they just shake their finger at me. I've only gotten a few tickets in my life, but I got tickets. And so it's a matter of, I guess, the philosophy and the culture of the town as to whether we give warnings or tickets. I would advocate for tickets. So the general request is for traffic calming measures, and then the specific request is for a stop sign at First Avenue East and 8th Street. I did email several times over the past year and a half about this, and I never got a response. So I don't know what happens to the emails, but that's why I'm here tonight, to make the request in person. So if there's something else I should do to make this happen, I would ask that you let me know, because I don't know what it is. Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Solomon.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I have several things to say this evening. First, I wanted to thank you all for...
Could you state your name?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My name is Arthur Dunn. I live at 2115 Lower Valley Road, south of town. And first of all, I wanted to thank you all for the work last week. I wasn't able to be here to listen to the Planning Commission, but I listened to it afterwards, the recording, and I really appreciated the thoughtfulness over the various issues that you guys discussed. One that I really appreciated was your discussion over light pollution and dark night restrictions. That is, I haven't broadly talked to my friends to know how many people in the Valley really care about such a thing, but I can say I am very thankful for you guys caring about that issue to really preserve the beauty of Montana and the night sky as much as we can. My next issue I wanted to mention that was very briefly discussed last week was in your Planning Commission. You mentioned a potential land acknowledgement. I can tell you that that would upset a lot of people here in the Valley, a lot of people in town, actually particularly among the younger generation. Such a thing is well, let me explain why it's considered disrespectful and offensive. Because all of the younger generation, in particular, that I know here in the Valley, are very proud Americans. And we consider ourselves Americans, and that America is our nation, is our home. We are not from England. We are not from Germany. We're not from, 400 years ago. Our ancestors may have come from Europe, or particularly in regards to me. 400 years ago, my ancestors were English. But my grandparents, my parents aren't English. They're Americans. So, and all my friends are the same. We've talked about this, and the Flathead Valley is America. And so it is just as much our land as other Americans, including the various tribes that live here in America. We are native to this land, just as they are. So just wanted to put that out there. And then my third thing, I know a month ago I spoke to you guys in regards to ICE and cooperation with ICE. I just wanted to present several more reasons in why that would keep our valley safer. We saw a lot of violence last month in Minneapolis when ICE had a surge there, and several people were killed. Plenty of other people were hurt. A lot of people arrested. And that is not because ICE was enforcing the law. That is because there were those who were attempting to prevent the law from being enforced. And because the local law enforcement in Minneapolis was not cooperating with ICE and was not keeping local resistance against the law in check. And so you had a lot of chaos and a lot of violence because of that. You can see other areas where ICE is working in force, not actual surges, because surges are used specifically for areas where they know they're going to get a lot of resistance to the law. But there's been a lot of ICE enforcement in Texas, a lot of enforcement in Georgia, but you're not having a lot of violence there because local law enforcement is cooperating and at the very least keeping resistance to the law in check. So cooperation is with ICE in enforcing the law actually prevents the chaos that we saw in Minneapolis. Another reason, which was actually mentioned just a minute ago, is that removing illegal immigrants from our nation is actually beneficial to Americans. It is, right now, it is very difficult in America with the current economy and current wages and prices of things going up while wages stay stagnant. And it's just simple economics. When you have plenty of workforce, wages stay low. But when there is a restricted workforce, then the worker, the normal working American who gets his hands muddy or bloody, I'm a butcher, so I have bloody hands while I'm at work. But the normal Montanan has the benefit when there is a restricted workforce, because then they can actually have leverage in regards to their wages and have more hope in being able to afford a home someday instead of just forever renting here in the valley. It's also would help, only minorly, but would help in a small way in housing prices here in the valley to work with ICE when they come, which is supposed to be this summer, though I can't confirm I can't confirm what my sources have told me about that. So, but rumors are that they're coming this summer. So I would just encourage the council to work with ICE when they reach out, when they come into the county. One more issue I almost forgot. We have a trouble with our jail. It is very full, I know that much. And so the main way that we can cooperate with ICE is when someone is arrested for whatever reason and they aren't a citizen. That's when you hand them over to ICE, which would take them out of our facility, relieving the burden upon the county and the city with our full jail system. So for all those reasons, I again encourage you guys to consider working with ICE and helping the law of the land to be enforced for the benefit of the Americans that live in the city and in the valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Only one shot, sorry. Anyone else? All right, we'll close public comment and move on to action items on the agenda. The first item on the agenda is Bitterroot Heights number 2 final plat. This item considers final plat approval for this subdivision containing 13 single-family and residential lots on 4.2 acres at 249 3 Mile Drive. Mr. Nygren, staff
Yes,
report.
Mayor and Council, I'll turn it over to PJ Sorensen for the staff report on this agenda item.
All right, thank you, Mayor Council. Michael Sandefur submitted a request for final plat approval of Bitterroot Heights number 2. Subdivision contains about 4.2 acres, which includes 13 single-family lots and common area. As far as location, you can see on the map here, you've got 3 Mile Drive and the bypass with North Riding Road coming in, and those lots just basically aligned along the existing roadway. It was sited on excess MDT land from the bypass. City Council approved the preliminary plat with 27 conditions on April 3rd, 2023. All of the conditions have been met or adequately addressed. All infrastructure has been installed and accepted, so there isn't a subdivision improvement agreement associated with this final plat. Cash in lieu of parkland in the amount of $32,522 was submitted through the Parks Department. With that, staff would recommend that City Council approve the final plat for Bitterroot Heights number 2 and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? No? Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Anyone wanting to address this topic on the agenda, please step forward to the mic, state your name, or raise your hand online. Okay, seeing none, I'll look to council for a motion on this item. Mr. Nunley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I make a motion to approve the final plat for Bitterroot Heights number 2.
I'll second.
Ms. Blank, second, thank you. Discussion? Mr. Dowd.
I have some discussion on this, and it has nothing to do with this particular plat. We see these things a lot, and we've had work sessions on them, and we see them come through the planning. So if you don't see us reacting at all to something up here, it's because we've already just discussed it. We've already had work sessions on it. I just don't want people to think that we're ignoring things and just being a pass-through for whatever. We do take these things seriously, but I don't have any comments on this particular final plat, but I do just want the public to know that sometimes you hear silence up here and it's awkward because it's like we didn't even really understand what was going on. Believe me, we're on top of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. We always appreciate you pointing that out for the public. All right, roll call vote.
Councilmember Blank?
Aye.
Councilor Dowd?
Aye.
Councilor Waterman?
Aye.
Councilor Fisher?
Aye.
Councilor Leftridge?
Aye.
Councilor Nunley?
Aye.
Councilor Walker?
Aye.
Mayor Hunter?
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, next item on the agenda is resolution number 6308, Stillwater Village preliminary plat extension. This item considers a 2-year extension on a previously approved plat for a subdivision with 181 lots on 67.18 acres on property located south of Silverbrook Estates, west of Highway 93 and Hagerman Lane, north of Northern Pines Golf Course, and bordering the Stillwater River on the western edge. Mr. Nygren.
Yes, Mayor and Council, once again, I'll turn it over to PJ Sorensen for the staff report.
All right, thank you, Mayor Council. This is a request by Al Corporation and Mark and Galen Owens to extend the preliminary plat for Stillwater Village for 2 years. The preliminary plat for the subdivision was approved in April of '23. The subdivision has 8 phases containing 181 lots, 67 which are detached single-family and 114 are attached single-family or townhomes on a total of 47 acres. Additionally, the plat contains about 20 acres in park area and park access for a total of 67.18 acres to serve both the initial 8 phases and future phases on the overall property. They're not part of the initial preliminary plat. As you can see, Silverbrook right off to the north and Highway 93 here on the eastern side. The overall red shows the overall property. The 8 phases of the preliminary plat were mainly focused in this area. And this was the area that I was talking about that was related to parkland and stormwater facilities. Condition 3 of the preliminary plat states that the plat will be valid for a period of 3 years from the date of approval, which is in accordance with the Kalispell subdivision regulations. Accordingly, the expiration date for the plat is April 3rd, 2026. The subdivision regulations provide for up to 2 2-year extension requests, and this is the first such request. If the extension is not granted, the applicant would be required to go back through the major preliminary plat process prior to final plat approval. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the resolution extending the Stillwater Village preliminary plat for an additional 2 years, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? No? Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Anyone wishing to address the council on this item?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move resolution number 6308, a resolution approving a 2-year extension to the preliminary plot of Stillwater Village subdivision.
Second.
Mr. Fisher, seconded. Thank you. Any discussion?
I agree with Mr. Dowd's previous comments. I know that this has been through, and part of it is like we've taken the time to read through the document. What I also just appreciate is just how long it takes to do these, and so going through an extension makes sense to make sure that the work continues. Spring might break sooner than we expect, but it's also just nice to know that we have these processes that keep moving forward, and that's part of our process.
Mr. Dowd.
Thanks. I just wanted to point out that we're seeing quite a few of these come through. There was a lot of units that were approved for to build in the last few years, and you know that the reality of the economy, the reality of our workforce available to build houses and things like that slow down these projects sometimes. I appreciate the people's patience on these extensions, but I think it's important that we allow them to continue through with the plan as long as there's nothing glaringly wrong and they're not dropping the ball just because they're disorganized or whatever. This is something that you're going to probably see more of this year. There's economic struggles all around. All of us have them. The developers have them. So just appreciate the patience of the people of the city of Kalispell as we extend some of these. Appreciate it.
Okay, then I'll just add on this one. You know, this is one of the first ones I saw where the stormwater goes to an existing natural wetland. And I know that with the project that was south of town that we had last year, I think, and just expressed a concern at that time and support this first time through. I'll remain consistent with that and support it again. Support this first time through. I'll remain consistent with that and support it again. But it is something I think we should start looking at and thinking about and seeing what information is out there about this and whether or not we need some regs around existing wetland systems. So with that, roll call vote.
Counselor Blank?
Aye.
Counselor Dowd?
Aye.
Counselor Waterman?
Aye.
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
Counselor Leftridge?
Aye.
Counselor Nennally,
Aye.
Counselor Walker,
Aye.
and Mayor Hunter.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, we removed the third item on the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, so we're moving on to the next agenda item. This is Resolution 6309, support for submission of build grant application for the Kalispell bypass, US Highway 93 to Airport Road. This resolution approves submission of an application to the United States Department of Transportation for better utilizing investments to leverage development or build grant to fund upgrades to the Kalispell bypass from US 93 to Airport.
The application is February 24th. And so we are just looking for a resolution of support from council. If you have any questions, let me know.
Questions for staff?
I do have a question for staff. We were pretty close last year on getting this one, but we fell short a little bit. Do you think our chances are about the same this year?
Yes, there is 1.5, I believe 1.5 billion available this year. Last year, there was only 400 million available. So as far as the money goes, we have a better chance. We were a project of merit last year, so it did get past the first initial round of review. So yes, I think we have a good chance.
All right, thank you.
Curious, what's the average number of submittals before it's accepted? Is that pretty common? Because it is another grants to not get in the first try, so I don't know about these.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers on that. All I know is that it goes through the same process every year. And we've scored consistently pretty high. It just kind of depends on the year and the funding available.
And the ones that are funded, is there anything different between the ones that are funded and the ones that aren't that were?
No, the project itself, it's a good project for the build grant. It falls under the guidelines pretty well. It's just kind of a matter of luck and getting selected.
Okay.
It's a competitive process.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of applications submitted. Usually your likelihood goes up as the years go on. You get better each go around. You're able to answer the questions. So our Tiger Grant, for example, for the Parkland Trail, that took 3 tries. So, you know, just as time goes on, continue to get in front of federal highways. They start to see the project. Obviously, as administrations change, priorities change. So, you know, I think just continuing to refine the project, show the need, will hopefully get us over the finish line this go around.
Thank you.
Well, just because there's been a couple different topics of discussion going on, I want to be very clear. This is just the south half of the bypass. This is not taking Main Street to 2 lanes.
Correct.
So just so everybody hears that, I know we all know that, but sometimes that doesn't translate out in the public, so.
I did forget one question for staff. I believe this grant goes away after this year. Is that correct? Or
Correct. Correct.
It goes away. This particular grant goes away. It might be replaced by another similar grant, but this is the last year for this one.
Correct. This is from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So this is the last year of this money being allocated for this grant. Yep.
Thank you.
Likewise, I think you're referring to as well the Safe Streets for All grant, which was discussed previously. That is not this one, but there is a number of opportunities out there that their funding cycle will be up. Certainly a new Congress can authorize new spending bills and such that would do this. Really, the build grant is kind of a continuation through all administrations. They changed the name. They have kind of their own nuances to them, but this particular one has been around for quite some time. It aligns with Tiger, it aligns with Rays. So, but likely there will be something similar to it in the future as well, even once this funding cycle is up.
Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item, please step forward, state your name at the mic, or raise your hand if you're online. Nope. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and look to council for a motion. Mr. Waterman.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to adopt Resolution 6309, a resolution of approval for the submission of an application to the United States Department of Transportation for a better utilization investments to leverage development build grant to fund upgrades to the Kalispell bypass from US 93 to Airport Road.
Second.
Ms. Blank, second, thank you. Discussion on this item. Mr. Waddington.
Even though it takes so long, I remember when I first moved to Kalispell, like you're able to take the bypass all the way up to Boys Lake Road, and then it just abruptly stopped. And I remember everybody at that time saying, "This will never be finished." Happy to see that the bypass is finished, but this is one of those spaces which I know still causes a little bit of headache because it's actually that first section that I was talking about, and how that affects truck traffic and would make the bypass much more complete and would actually, I think, do what the bypass is supposed to do, which is really take some of that heavy traffic off of the rest of the community. So fully support this again.
Yeah, I'll just say that I know when we had this discussion about the Safe Streets for All plan, and ultimately it was voted down. One of the big reasons it was voted down was the feeling that we wanted to get this in place first to relieve some of that traffic on Main Street and divert it to the bypass. When will we hear about whether or not we get this grant?
Last time it was sometime in June. It goes up and down, so June-ish, somewhere in there is likely when we'll hear back on that one.
Okay. So, still it'd be, it's good to know that there's a lot more funding and that we were close last time. So I think the likelihood is pretty high that we'll get this. So that's encouraging. I know there's a lot in the community that feel this is an important first step before doing anything on Main Street. And so hopefully we will be awarded this grant. So with that, we'll get a roll call vote.
Counselor Blank.
Aye.
Counselor Dowd.
Aye.
Counselor Waterman.
Aye.
Counselor Fisher.
Aye.
Counselor Leftridge.
Aye.
Counselor Nunley.
Aye.
Counselor Walker.
Aye.
Mayor Hunter.
Aye, motion carries. Last item on the agenda is, action agenda is Resolution 6310, record request fees and procedures. This resolution considers modifying the fee schedule and procedures for copies and research of non-routine public record requests per changes in state law. Mr. Nygren.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'll turn it over to Amy here in a minute, but really just have a resolution before you that is following some changes in state law. Need to come up, get in compliance with that and with anything in regards to all the public records requests that the city does and the city staff gets on a regular basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
All right, thank you, Jared. So as Mr. Nygren was mentioning, this is a public records request resolution that would change the fees and procedures related to non-routine records requests. We do get those quite frequently, and they are time-consuming. So this basically aligns us with new state laws regarding how we can handle records requests. It also helps with procedures because we did purchase records request management software to help us handle those requests so we can handle those efficiently and make sure that we're taking care of them all the way we should. That'll also help us with redactions, keeping track of which staff has what. I think it will make it easier for the public as well. It'll be a more streamlined process. They'll be able to submit their records request online, which they can now, but they'll also receive the documents via that same process. And that'll also give us storage, a way to track things. It does have a cost associated with it, like all software. We will be paying $9,300 a year for that software, so there is a cost with it. The state law changes state that we do need to provide the first hour free. So the first hour of staff time for fulfilling a non-routine records request will be free. After that, it's $25 an hour. Quite a bit of the staff time comes from the city attorney's office. So as you can imagine, there is a little bit of difference there between what we're actually paying staff and what we'll be receiving. But despite that, we need to comply with state law. We did put in a $5 filing fee that would be everyone would be subject to when they submitted their records request. That should help us a little bit with the software costs, and that was placed in the state law that we could go ahead and charge that $5 filing fee. The other fees within the records request resolution mimic state law and are related to things like if we need to, for some reason, get a flash drive or send things in the mail, we can recover those types of costs. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And I would add real quickly, the city council did adopt a previous resolution that allowed for fees. This would update that resolution, which is now we're not in accordance with state law. That's why we need to do this. But once again, coming from the state, it did significantly reduce the amount of fees the city can collect in order to provide this service. So, but that's just what we got to deal with.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. What percentage are done in the first hour that are that quick on the requests?
There are quite a few that actually are resolved within the first hour. In fact, we provided the first 15 minutes free up until now, and many of them can be done in 15 minutes. Most of the police department records requests, some of the development services requests, but the ones that cannot be done in an hour usually take many hours to fulfill.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr.?
Recognizing, still now is it?
Yeah.
Is it red? Okay. Recognizing that much of this is now digital, is the 25 cents per page for the copying of the materials, is that still being charged for those digital requests?
No, they are not being charged for the digital requests. Those are only if someone says, I want paper copies, which is very rare.
Thank you.
I had a question about, so section 4, number 13, there's this clause about the city manager may waive fees or reduce fees based on, consideration of undue hardship. And I'm wondering, how is it determined undue hardship, and would it make sense to clarify that more about what qualifies as undue hardship?
Certainly, the council could take some of that burden off of my plate. I actually did get a request for this relatively recently. Often nonprofits will ask for a waiver, and basically have said no to that request. So I think an undue hardship would be much more than just having a nonprofit status. We've tried not to treat, for-profit, not-for-profit differently. So certainly would be open to some discussions on that. It's not something that I would take lightly, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know where council would want to go with that, but for the most part, that's not a discretionary item I would take upon myself lightly, so.
And I would just add that I don't think in the 11 years I've been here, I don't think we've ever waived those fees, per that. And that was in the original resolution.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Okay, I'll open this item up to public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step to the mic, state your name for the record, or raise your hand if you're online.
Arthur Dunn again, 2115 Lower Valley Road. Just two quick questions. How many of the city records that are requested, well, I guess just of the whole database are digital, and how many are still just only on paper? And then second question, those that are in digital systems, are they across multiple databases or accessible via one database? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Okay, close public comment and look for a motion on this item.
All right, I want to give this a try. I think I found it. All right. I would move that we approve Resolution 6310, a resolution superseding Resolutions 5128 and 5804, modifying the fee schedule for copies and research of public information and/or records, modifying procedures and requesting public records, implementation and collection of the fee schedule,
and affirming the requirements of information to be retained by the city of Kalispell.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. It's moved and seconded. Discussion on this item. Nothing, okay. Well, I think this is kind of an important item because when it comes to government transparency, I think this item more than almost anything really hits at the heart of transparency. You know, the ability to ask for records that may not be in our agenda or, public is I believe fundamental right of citizens to ask of their government. And a barrier of fees can be a problem if they're high. And obviously we have to be able to, pay for some of that work. And so I'm not opposed to fees. That's why I did ask about the undue hardship though, because if it becomes a barrier for the public to learn about what their government is doing through records requests, that's a problem. And I do
year to evaluate if anybody is being disenfranchised from public records. It would be interesting to see how much time it takes when it reaches the county attorney's office and evaluate that at that point. Because we really don't have those numbers previously, but I understand what you're saying. It'd be interesting to monitor it in 1 year.
I'd be really cautious about any kind of nonprofit versus for-profit breakout, because one of the biggest abusers of this are political PACs, and they're all nonprofit, right? So I don't want to give them a break at all. I have a big heart for people that have low income, but I don't want to give those guys a break at all. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree with Mr. Fisher. I really appreciate the staff and the city's investment in this new software, and hopefully being able to utilize that in order to process these quicker, and having new fee structure to operate under will actually lower the barrier to be able to receive this information. But let's take a look at it after a year, see if there are barriers. If it is more expensive than 25 cents a page, getting medical records for our clients, that can be extremely expensive. So being able to kind of see how this new system works, I'd be open to revisiting it if indeed it becomes a barrier.
Agreed. Yeah, and I might also say, I guess, just looking into what other cities do with this undue hardship, whether it's defined any further in other cities or other states. I know this is a common clause, across the country in terms of these records requests. Maybe just seeing if there isn't any kind of examples out there of other cities approaching it in a creative way to define that better or have some sort of benchmark of how they handle that. So with that, we'll get a roll call vote.
Counselor Blank?
Aye.
Counselor Dowd?
Aye.
Counselor Waterman?
Aye.
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
Counselor Leftridge?
Aye.
Counselor Nunley?
Aye.
Counselor Walker?
Aye.
Mayor Hunter?
Aye, motion carries. All right, city manager report.
Yes, Mayor Council, so a note taken. I'll make sure I put in my calendar to reevaluate this in a year and just see where we're at. Hopefully in a city manager report in a year or so, I'll have an update for you. I will say generally applicable to that, it would likely be more individual based rather than an organization or something like that. A hardship on an individual, low income, some sort of tragedy happened where they're looking for a service, but certainly we'll look into some items. Just a couple updates. Since we did talk about the bill grant and that resolution, just so the council's aware, I am starting to reach out to some of the council members that are on kind of the next rotation. We do a typical DC trip. And one of the items we do kind of go there for is kind of to go advocate for some of our projects such as build. Do not have this scheduled yet, but probably sometime in April, May. So looking at doing that. Once I have kind of more of a date kind of tied down, I'll let the council be aware of that. Downtown Forward is a great group. You heard Gabe talking about that, but they're certainly starting to look at some parking and some parking kind of resolutions. You got the downtown driving it. Staff is helping where we can just to get them some data and such, but they are looking at trying to get together some recommendations to the Parking Advisory Board and the City Council. So, no timeline on that, but it is good to see a project or a group out there working on things like that. Certainly staff has been part of that for a long time, and, we'll continue to provide them some help as needed. But really it's just facilitating a process. Like tonight you saw removal of agenda item number 3. That was really just in regards to that ordinance. It's not something imminent that needed to be changed immediately, but that was just a recommendation coming out of the Parking Advisory Board. We did notice that the way it was written was going to impact another parking space. So rather than try and go through and change all the language on the fly, we'll just, take a look at it and change the language to make sure we get that right before that's adopted. Lastly, once again, going to be working on the Montana Land Use Planning Act document next week, and also be holding a work session on that coming up. So that's all I got.
Council reports. And we'll start going this way. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Today, I know myself and a couple councilors, we had the opportunity to go to Kalispell Chamber of Commerce luncheon. I think it was a perfect timing. That in society today, especially in the Flathead, we are really needing to make sure that we are ensuring that our STEM education is built in such a robust way that in the future, as our kids get older, they will be able to attend and get jobs that are built here in the Valley. I think there were some things there that I learned that we're doing in Montana that are pushing the technology boundaries, and I think that's amazing. But I think we need to make sure that we're set to prioritize that going forward in our own community, so that we're not creating a stumbling block away from that. So I look forward to see that continue at some point.
Just wanted to really echo when we brought this up at the last work session that Mr. Atkinson had passed. Jim Atkinson was an amazing leader for this council, but for this town, for downtown Kalispell. I had the unique honor of running against Mr. Atkinson, and the entire time that, even though I eventually won that seat, he was always gracious. We sat and talked. I learned so much through that race, but through the years since then, he has continued to advise and give advice, I know, to many council members, but to so many in the city. 29 years of commendable service here on the council. I always remembered that when I first ran against him, remembering that I was probably his age when I first was running against him. But just to actually see his service since being on the council, how much he has done for the History Museum, but also for making sure that seniors can stay in mobile homes, and just that commendable work where he was just a really good community steward and a true Kalispell leader, and really proud to share Ward 3 with such a great legacy builder for the city of Kalispell. So really just want to make sure that we all take that moment to commend and to honor great service of Jim Atkinson.
Thank you.
I just wanted to briefly address one of the public comments from this evening about First Avenue East. It's definitely something that is impactful for the folks of Ward 3. And I've definitely been on First Avenue East on Friday nights, and people using it as a drag strip. And so one of the things that I'd be very curious on exploring is how we can continue to work with the good people of Cruise Kalispell to support their mission, because it is good. But also being able to deter the lawlessness and the degradation of some of the downtown neighborhoods by those that are willingly and choosing to break the law. And I believe that there is a solution and a way in order to address this in a thoughtful way.
I agree with both previous comments. Kalispell Cruise with the true group is organized, and I think they'd be willing to sit down with us. It's those outliers that create the problem. And in agreeing with Mr. Waterman, I got to work with Jim Atkinson with the county for years, and just a great man. Didn't see that coming at all. He was just here a couple months ago, and just hats off to Jim Atkinson, a good person. I've had several calls about, and Jared, this is probably for you since Susie is not here, and I think I know the answer, but lack of snow and snow plows not running, those funds, I know you alternate work and do a lot of other things, but people want to hear that. Maybe on your community service page, additional maintenance that's being taken place because of the lack of snow. Some staff probably isn't brought on for snow plows, but just maybe a little overview for people with this year that many have not seen for some time, 20 some years, maybe, on where those funds are being expended for the betterment of Kalispell would be a nice explanation.
Yes, absolutely. So staff is still there. They're just doing other work. Certainly the staff does a lot of seasonal work. They've been doing a lot of street sweeping, ironically, as of late, as well as they were doing some, I believe it was in one of the recent manager reports, some collar work on manholes and such. So they certainly are continuing to work. It does actually help with the budget in that sense. So just, the staff is still there doing the work, but certainly there hasn't been all the snow plowing and the gas and all those types of things that come along with it, and the overtime and all that kind of stuff. So there's been a cost savings. It doesn't happen every year. You can't necessarily budget for a year like this. It would be nice. But yes, there's a lot of things that staff is continuing to do. They're able to help out with parks quite a bit, especially after that large wind event was kind of a blessing in disguise, because there was some additional manpower that could be put towards that, because that was a huge event, and we're able to do a lot of that cleanup as well. So we certainly partner with the different departments, do very well working with each other to cover some of the needs. So
Thank you, sir.
Is that it?
Yes.
You all done? Okay, cool. I have a interesting ask for the community. I do understand the scrutiny that we have on people cruising up and down Main Street on Friday and Saturday nights, especially. And I just would ask people to, understand that the actual the community organization, the Cruise Kalispell, only really holds maybe at the height of the season in the summer, maybe one night a month. And but the continual people that cruise up and down Main Street are not actually, representing that organization. So I just want to make sure that the people at Kalispell can make that differentiation. I think back in August or September, I asked that we have a breakout of traffic enforcement on Main Street, First and First, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday nights in the city manager report. And maybe I just missed it in this one. I didn't see it. I'm trying to get a year-round picture of that. And it's for a couple reasons. First off, if you see a problem there, like things aren't happening, then we need to address that. But on the other hand, if things are happening and they're just not being noticed by the public, I would love to just highlight, hey, we are down there, we're doing enforcement. These are the things that happened this, over this past month on Friday, Saturday nights, whatever. I just would love to have that included in the city manager report again, so it's easy for me to find. I know I'm a pain in the butt, but that's kind of what it says, I think, up there. So, anyway, I appreciate that. It was there for a while. I haven't seen it, so I'd like that beat.
So do you want the old one in there? Are you wanting to see like current numbers?
I want to see current numbers, but I'd like to look back over the city manager reports and kind of get like a year-round picture of what's going on. Right now, it's not that big of a deal because, people aren't really doing that right now as much anyway. But as we get closer to spring and summer, it's going to become something that we're going to be addressing more, right? So I'd love to have some stats that I can look back and say, hey, you guys approved the emergency levy, and we added X number of officers, and here's, you know, the result. Here's of this single complaint that, you know, people are bringing forth to council. I'd love to be able to show that, and or look at it and say, hey, we're really not doing enough according to the community. I just like to be able to address it easily, and I'm a stat-driven guy, so that's what I'm looking at.
So in the last manager's report, did you notice a KPD dashboard?
Yeah.
And then the number of traffic stops and the
Oh,
increase? in
so I
those?
saw that in this one. Is there a specific section?
It is not, so that's
Okay.
not specific to downtown. That's the city in general, because like you said, right now, there is no cruise going on downtown, so there's not gonna be a stat.
Sure. Well, now, and I'm not worried about Cruise Kalispell. I'm worried about people cruising Main Street on Friday and Saturday nights. You know, I'm trying to make that differentiation as well, because I think the organization gets a lot of flack for stuff that they have no part in, right? So I just would like to, I'm excited in one sense because I want people to see that, hey, we brought on a whole bunch more, you know, officers to help us out here. And, you know, here's the results you're getting. This is just one little microcosm. We can show that. So would that be a tough thing to put into the report?
Well, the cruising on Main Street, I hate to even call it the Cruise Kalispell, because like you said, it's not necessarily that group. It's the cruising that's happening like I said, it's not happening right now, so they're not gonna really have any stats in regards to that. And regardless of the increased staffing, an event like that is gonna take a lot of resources that,
Sure.
you know, KPD is citywide. It's not targeting Main Street per se. So to do what you're wanting requires a targeted effort for Main Street to have stats for that, which, like I said, we're not necessarily targeting Main Street in any way at this point in time, so.
Sure.
But
and
during
I'd
the-
like to, maybe you can tell me if this is too much of an ask to put into your regular report. But that's something that I'm really interested in, at least following up. And, you know, if I need to sit down with you, you know, during the week sometime, and we can just go over that, and I can, you know, get an idea. I'd love to give a report and say, this is what we saw in April, this was we saw in May, you know, that kind of thing, just so that I can assuage some of the people that come to me and say, hey, why aren't you guys doing anything down there? And we're down there. I go down there specifically on Friday nights just to check it out, to see, I want to see the police presence down there. I want to see what's going on, and we're there. And I see people, you know, get pulled over. I'm more worried at this point about First and First than I am actual Main Street, because it looks like that's where people are getting away with stuff more. And anyway, I just want to make sure that the public understands that we as a city are taking their complaints seriously.
Jared, can I interject real quick? So some of the information that we can get, all those questions you have, we can get a lot of that information. But we have to keep in mind, say a traffic stop, we make a traffic stop on First and First. They may not stop until First and Fourth, and that data will not be included in that. So we would need a little bit broader area.
Oh, actually, I'm talking about Main Street and First on East and First West.
Right.
The whole, you know, avenue around Main Street.
I'm just saying we would need to go a little bit wider than that, just because it's possible the location is actually mapping through CAD on Third or on Second, because it's the location of the stop.
And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Anything that's reasonable, I just want to make sure that we can get a framework and then stick with it so we can kind of track stats.
We have it. It's just a matter of if it needs to be a monthly thing regarding the cruise. That is not what we've been doing. We provided the stats over the summer, but certainly given that the traffic stops are all tracked, and we could do that and make an assumption that maybe it's tied to
Yeah, we don't have to
cruising,
make the assumptions. I just want to show that enforcement is happening in the core area at the request of, you know, our community. Not that we weren't doing it anyway. I just want to make sure that they can see that we're doing it.
All right, I have a few items to continue that conversation a little bit. I do hope the dialogue around Kalispell cruising continues, and hopefully we identify more ideas of how we can address that, because there's definitely a schism in the community. People who hate it and people who love it. And we need to find a way to address both those concerns and support for the events. But in terms of the public comment on First Avenue East, I will note that we had discussed last year about bringing forward at some point a traffic calming policy, because we do, I would say, one of the big issues that we get public comment on is this very issue. And First Avenue East is only the latest of a number of streets throughout our community that neighbors are concerned about in terms of the traffic and the behavior of people driving in the community. And so I think having a policy on traffic calming and specifically looking at our standards and what we can do to make it easier to do traffic calming in our community, I think is really important, and I hope we can make progress on that moving forward. Obviously, anytime comment comes forward from the community about a particular street, I hope we do, staff is able to take a look and see if there's anything easy we can do, whether it is stop sign suggestions. I know we get that all the time, and a lot of times it just doesn't meet the warrants for that. But any other, easy fixes that we can think of to address public concern, it'd be nice if we can do that and be proactive about responding to public concern over that. Last week we talked about having committee reports and community reports, an opportunity for community members to come in and give longer presentations and have a dialogue and maybe give PowerPoint presentations. We did have a proposal from, is it MDOT that for access on 93, their plan? Yeah, 93 North, they're looking at access control plan for that, and they had a presentation and stuff. So if it's all right with council, invite them to give a community report at that time on that topic, and opportunity for us to ask questions and have dialogue with them. And then also Habitat for Humanity was interested in giving a presentation to us about their programs, and they're kind of undertaking new ways of doing their work, and so I think they want to share that with the community. They've done that, I think, up in Columbia Falls. So I'd like to invite them to also give a community report as well to council, if it's all right. Okay. And then last thing, I did mention a while ago that I got locked out of my personal political Facebook page because of a changed phone number. I did finally get a new page up. This is not associated with the city. It's just my personal political page, but for those who were following it before or are interested in following it, it's just where I share my opinions and news about the city. So look for Mayor Ryan Hunter on Facebook, and that's my new second personal political page. So with that, we will adjourn, and then we will move immediately into our work session on the growth plan.
Put my coat on, it's cold as hell up here.
I think we need to call it Cruise with the K.
Give it a minute.
Yeah, maybe.
In order, and welcome everybody to our city council work session. We have one item on the agenda, the ongoing review of the Kalispell land use plan draft, and I'll turn it over to City Manager Nygren.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, thank you for taking the time. I know we're already an hour and a half in the meeting, but knowing kind of the time sensitivity of this, continuing to move forward is much appreciated. Doing a work session here, look at going through chapter 4 here. If there's more time, certainly can continue to do that, but just a continuing discussion about the land use plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to PJ to go through chapter 4.
Okay. And before I step into chapter 4, we went through a number of chapters last time and we made some changes in the draft and just kind of wanted to show you the changes that we did make going through there. First couple were related to kind of the desire to have some acknowledgement of the native tribes that were in here. So this is one place where we noted that early in the vision statement. And then down on page 5, I guess it's a little bit later on here. Let me jump down to it. In the brief history of Kalispell, this is where we added a little bit more detail on that. So going back up here to, we did expand and add a couple sections that I'll get into about other potential growth scenarios. We put that in chapter 1, and then potential entitlement city status we put in chapter 2. So you're down to 18. And this is where we put in some of the additional information on the potential growth scenarios. Put a little bit more explanation in where the 2.5% projection came from. And then added this section where we were looking at what some of those figures might look like if we had something that was less than what we were projecting or maybe a little bit more. And then just kind of reminding everybody that, if we're off on some of these projections, it's always something we can step back into and should step back into under the terms of the plan. Okay, down to 31. So there's a lot of discussion, some of the bullet points coming through here, so you can kind of see some of the changes that we did. First one was dealing with the transition of rural lands into the city fabric, and kind of pointing out that it doesn't necessarily mean matching what's there, but basically what we're trying to do is take reasonable steps to integrate the new urban development into existing rural neighborhoods. And creating possibilities to extend infrastructure to those existing neighborhoods at the appropriate time. So, an example for that would be some of these areas where we've come back later, typically with grant money, and put in sidewalks. There was a lot of discussion on 2 Mile about how that interface goes between urban and rural development. So it was kind of defining that a little bit more. We added in a little bit more here on industrial districts, kind of acknowledging that we need to provide a more diverse industrial base. Still kind of keeping that standard that generally they should be concentrated in real accessible areas, but also wanting to strategically locate high-tech or light industrial uses in appropriate areas through town. This is also where we put in a provision in here where we're looking at a general policy, encouraging development and density close to existing infrastructure, close to the city, accomplishes a lot in terms of eliminating sprawl out into other open areas that we would really want to preserve, whether they're inside our planning jurisdiction or out. Also kind of taking a look at how that reduces long-term maintenance of infrastructure and creating a more walkable or biking-friendly community. This next section was where we addressed the potential entitlement city status. That's where under the Housing and Urban Development CDBG program, when you get to be a city over 50,000, become eligible for annual funding projects that can really contribute quite a bit to some of the infrastructure needs that we would have. When we're looking at the population projections, we would expect that we could become an entitlement city by 2045, which is within the framework of the plan. And the last one was we added a policy here as far as maintaining and potentially expanding outdoor lighting standards designed to prevent light trespass and reduce dark sky related impacts. and I guess the actual last one, housing types such as, there was a little bit of a comment that came through as far as infill housing, the types of housing that would be in there. So I don't think there was any in chapter 3. So with the changes we made, was that all in line with what the council wanted us to do?
Thank you very much, yes.
Sure, okay. So jumping down to chapter 4, which is where we're starting tonight, that's really focused on city services and infrastructure. And this intro page, it's really important because this is one of the core aspects of what the land use plan is that there's a lot of facility plans out there that aren't repeated within this document, but they're incorporated by reference into this document. So, specifically, you've got the water facility plan, sanitary sewer, the wastewater treatment facility plan, transportation plan, solid waste master plan. And as you all know, we're doing updates to those, and that's part of the process on here is that we bring those on board when we need to, but those are all incorporated by reference. So a lot of the nitty gritty on some of those plans is actually in those documents. Also talks about the parks plan. Currently we're working under the one that was from 2006, but there's an update well underway that would be incorporated in here as well. There was reports and studies done through based on the police and fire services. We didn't specifically incorporate these in because they weren't specifically adopted by council. So they're out there and they're good background information to acknowledge in here, but we didn't specifically incorporate them into the document the way that we did other ones that were specifically adopted by council. So any questions on how all that comes together? So, okay. So jumping down, like we did with the other ones, we kind of structured this around the Land Use Act and the structure within the act and just kind of hitting the points that they were called out within state statutes. So first is police protection. And most of these sections have the issues, goals, policies, and recommendations that we kind of talked about, which is kind of a format that the city's traditionally used in growth policies and land use plans. But you can kind of see stepping down through here, there was some discussion on the jail. Certainly that's been an issue, and hopefully that's going to be moving forward with the bond levy that was passed. Acknowledging.
DJ, just a question there. So since that bond is passed, is that documents that are included or just referred to in this document?
Well, it's just referred to in here, and at the point that you've got here is it's certainly an issue, and it's a current issue, with some of the jail crowding. It's going to be several years before that comes out, but certainly, acknowledging that that's something out there that would be part of the overall services going to the community. Stepping through goals, a lot of these are fairly broad, ensuring they're safe and healthy neighborhoods. This is another one where you have fostering partnerships for jail expansions. Some other ones stepping in through drugs, using established relationships between law enforcement agencies. Just kind of scroll through these here. But again, most of them are, for the most part, fairly general goals.
Do these goals include who our partners are, including federal, like the comments we're getting with respect to ICE? I know later in here there's a discussion about it, but is there anything related to ICE as we are getting comments on?
Nothing refers to any specific federal agency or state agency, I believe, in here. You can see in recommendations, which is near the lower part of this page, coordination between all law enforcement agencies provide a seamless service of law enforcement in the community. So it's not making those judgments and decisions on specifically whether to involve ICE or not, but just kind of acknowledging that as a general rule, as a general policy, maintaining those relationships is beneficial.
And that is a current management style of the city and the county at this point, is to work with all agencies.
Yes, I'm not sure if Jordan's still there, but yes.
Yes, it is. I mean, especially when you look at some of the things we're doing, whether it's the drug task force and human trafficking, if you're to separate from federal agencies, you lose your ability to then enforce those types of things. So yes, we cooperate with them for that.
Thank you.
So then, again, in terms of policies, adequately staffing them, apply unbiased enforcement of the laws. I don't think there'd be too much debate on that. We did include, pursuing broken window enforcement strategies, which is basically, as it says in here, this approach suggests that visible disorder like vandalism can lead to more serious crime if left unchecked.
That's just, I had one question with that. I mean, I understand the general principle and where we're going with that, and again, that this isn't, we're talking land use and this is a policing section. I guess my only question is there of not citing something like the crime prevention through environmental design, which I know is something that is standard that we're recommending in Parks and Recs. And again, that's just open design concept of well-lit, well-patrolled spaces, but is there a reason why we're just using just broken window and not using some other?
Not specifically, and I guess I don't know enough the nuances of the different approaches there, but I mean, if the council wanted to, we can broaden that to just say, pursue alternate forms of law enforcement.
I guess the reason I bring up the design one is, again, specifically it comes up in the Parks and Rec plan. I mean, that's sort of the universal vision of something I first got introduced when I was doing some work around with the chamber. And just whether or not we would want to consider broader language, or also that enforcement by design is also just a standard that we would like to have, or a policy that we endorse.
Yeah, I think that would be an additional policy or recommendation there. And I think that it's something that would be warranted. It's just something that hadn't gotten brought up till actually relatively recently in the Parks Master Plan. I know council talked a bit about it, so that certainly would be something it probably, rather than incorporating it in there, would just be another bullet point or another number there.
I guess just broadly, I'm a little uncomfortable I feel like we're telling the police department how to do their job a little bit from up here. And with their policy, I feel like we should leave that up to the chief of police to best utilize his forces how he thinks they should be used. I don't know that we should be telling the chief how to do his job, I guess. I worry about that a little.
And again, what I'm more advocating for is just some design, like an indication towards design in general, that when we're designing parks, that we're using some standards that make it easier for patrolling.
Yep.
Versus, I agree where you are, versus getting into how we're patrolling, but that's our standards that we would like to see.
As a general overview, though, broken window policy isn't just about a broken window, right? It's a broad brush when you're talking that. So it is absolutely a good place to have it in this point, because it is broad. We're not telling them exactly, you got to do this. We're saying we pursue broken window enforcement strategies as a whole. And I also agree that design standards isn't in this section. It's in a different section altogether. So I think the way I read this from my little bit of background in it, that is exactly how that is stated, is how that works.
I'm wondering, just in terms of, to get that sense of broad approach, and also being flexible to the point of new information comes out, new standards and so forth, of that number 4 being just pursue best practices enforcement strategies. That could include broken windows, can include design, whatever else comes forward, and just kind of keep it general in that way, and then it's up to the chief to determine what are the best practices to enforce.
So basically, quote unquote, broken window policies. I mean, really, when we get right down to it, it's what it is.
Well, that's one of them, but there are others.
Broken window policy, when I'm saying that, that is not one. That's the whole broad breadth, right? Yeah. In this context, it's not just broken windows, it's the whole gamut.
No, I know, but it's a strategy. It's a strategy of enforcing smaller crime issues in order to prevent the bigger ones. That is one strategy. I understand it's not just dealing with broken windows, but it's one strategy, and there are others as well. And like, I see the effectiveness of that. There has
years of historical data that go back to that's a proven one.
Yeah, and
It is.
there's some controversy behind it, but I don't think that affects Kalispell, and I'm not worried about it. But, I'm fine with that, but I think that having it broader so that we can incorporate others that either exist or may come up in the future would make sense.
Much more comfortable with that.
We certainly can put something together. The design is an important aspect, which goes back to lighting, dark spaces, just general design requirements that you look at from a different lens to prevent, areas where those types of things typically happen. We certainly looked at it as a Parkland Trail was developing, lighting, landscaping, all that factors into it. So it's pretty common practice, and it's something that would be pretty easy to add into here.
It's also important to notate that KPD, enforces the law, but they also enforce council policy. So we are, and we always do, direct the police to do whatever. I mean, ultimately, if they're doing something wrong policy-wise, it comes back to us. The only time that they're held accountable is for individual officer actions that are, outside norms. So, we do actually, our butt's on the line for what they're doing out there as far as what they're enforcing, policy that we direct them to do. I don't want to take any heat off of us because that's where the public eye should come up to here because they follow our direction.
Okay. Stepping into recommendations. Ms.
PJ, may I
Rowley,
just follow up, if it's okay?
Sure.
I just wanted to put in, I actually like having broken window in there for a lot of reasons, but so I won't go over what's already been stated, but could it be that we say pursue best practices such as broken window? I just think it's important to have it. It is a broad brush, I agree, but it's social policy. There's so much packed into that I, as a council member, wouldn't want to lose that personally.
I agree.
Okay.
But I
think
hear what you're
that
saying,
seems
Wes.
like
Yeah.
exactly where was just like, you don't want to make it too narrow, but you want to be able to have it open. And I think that language really works as a proposal.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. In recommendations, you can see, calling out for that coordination of law enforcement. We kind of touched on that a little bit ago, pursuing grants, a lot of things, making sure that law enforcement has the tools to be able to do their job. Stepping into the next section is fire and ambulance service. You can see here, some of the issues and policies that's flowing through here is kind of recognizing that, the primary area for the fire departments within city limits, but there are aid agreements with other rural districts around town, both them coming in and us going out. And as we go through here, you'll kind of see that that's called out as part of that. There is some reference in here to the ISO rating, which is actually coming up fairly soon, but maintaining that through adequate training facilities and staffing is an important thing and is an important factor in insurance policies and the costs through the city. But certainly one of the issues that's come up lately is that 1/3 of the EMS bills are fully paid by customers when they utilize the service. That's kind of been an ongoing funding issue with the fire department.
And in that regard, is there the ability to put in a policy or a recommendation, being able to pursue alternative mechanisms for like Medicaid reimbursement, federal fund reimbursement? Is that something we're doing?
So one thing we did recently do is move to a third-party billing service, which actually initially is showing some progress as far as revenue. We have a limited window here to go off of, but there is, stay tuned on that. There is a program that can funnel through the state that guarantees it, but it would have to be adopted through the state. And my understanding is that is kind of happening, but certainly when the city's going to a legislative session and making sure we're going and kind of, I guess, lobbying for those types of things would be very important. I know our new fire chief is more in tune with that than myself, but certainly that is some of the programs that the state can make some of these programs whole, where like Kalispell's certainly feeling it for sure, but that would have to funnel through the state in order to do that.
I'd be in favor of putting something along those lines as a goal.
when you look at the goals, some of this has to do, you know, I touched base on the mutual aid agreements, maintaining those, trying to maintain that class 3 or better with the ISO rating. As far as policies, you know, certainly, you know, making sure that, you know, the adopted fire, electrical, and building codes are complied with through the city, maintaining a safe working environment, and providing adequate training and resources. And then down here, as far as the recommendations, again, tying back to the ISO rating and continuing necessary multi-company, multi-jurisdictional involvement. And they're just identifying some of the fire locations.
Jay, sorry. Under fire department, because I know there is an issue, it's been a kind of a long-standing issue in Flatthead County, and that is interagency working with radio communications. Is that here, or is there another, am I missing another section for?
No, I think that some of that's, you know, again, the scope of this is, you know, part of the land use plan and how we're providing some of that. And so the same way that you saw facility plans, where some of the nitty gritty of that is tied in there. I would probably say that'd probably be more in some of the, you know, the fire police report as opposed to the land use plan.
Okay. And I would agree. It is, for fire department, it is a huge thing in Flatthead County. So that's why
I'm sure it is. Yes.
A little bit difference than law enforcement side of that. So.
Yeah. And what I would say is a lot of what you have in the land use plan are relatively broad strokes, right? And so, you know, number 4, for example, in recommendations is continuing fostering working relationships with other responding agencies, provide the necessary means, support mutual and automatic aid. So a lot of what you're seeing in here is you're providing that foundation when you start developing those specific plans or specific ordinances down the road, and something like that would tie right into developing a specific plan related to that.
Okay.
So healthcare, there's a couple sections in here that we need to address under MLUPA, healthcare being one of them. And it's a little bit weird in some senses because they're not a city department, and so it's not our plan per se, but you're kind of recognizing that it's an important service that's out there to support the growing community. And we did meet with Logan Health, for example, on this and had some discussions on that. So you know, some of this is kind of recognizing needs that they have, but kind of recognizing what the city might be able to do to support some of that. There's some discussion in here about, if you recall, we did a plan unit development to try to work with them, because it was kind of a unique setup up there, right? You know, it was originally an H1 zone, a healthcare zone, but it was really a campus. You know, you had buildings under the same umbrella all over the place, shared parking lots, directional signage that really are kind of unique to what was up there. And that's a lot of what was kind of discussed in some of the recommendations and policies as you kind of come through here.
A lot of it just knowing that as the city grows and the hospital grows, it's going to become a lot more dense up there, taller parking garages, all those things. So trying to get ahead of that so that it's becoming more under single ownership as well. It was very kind of disjointed in the past, a lot of ownerships and things, but that is one good thing about a good thing about some of the ownership changes is it's actually allowed them to kind of do some better planning as a campus where it was pretty disjointed in the past, but certainly we'll need to plan for getting a lot more dense in the future.
Right. And I would say they certainly have their own plans for expansion to try to continue to meet the needs of the community. But it was, the crux of it was, again, acknowledging that that's a service that the community needs and just looking at how that plugs into the growth. Next section is really getting into utility services, the first one being water. And again, I would remind you that a lot of the detail on this ties to those facility plans that you'll be looking at in depth separately in the next several weeks or so with separate work session. You know, again, stepping down through issues, you can certainly see that there's, you know, aging water mains and fittings, how those get replaced is something that's part of the facilities plan and what sizes they should be replaced with. Looking at the water rights that we have, calling out that we need to continually monitor and when necessarily upgrade and expand the water system, both in terms of, you know, supply, storage, and distribution to make sure that there's adequate capacity does mention in here, we've had 2 separately managed pressure zones. There's a third one that's under development that kind of goes out towards Foy's Lake with the development that's out there. Certainly in some areas of town, limited fire flow can hinder redevelopment and reinvestment. Private water systems.
EJ, if I may, is number 6 intended to specifically address Main Street downtown? There's a great article.
No,
that
but
you
that's
can
a very
say
good
about that.
example of situations but there's a lot of areas that you can see where there's, older systems with dead end lines. I know often I think like 8th Avenue East, for example, there's a long dead end line that doesn't loop out and you don't get good fire flows off of that. But certainly that's an issue as the system gets developed and upgraded over time. And some of these other ones, talking about, water mains not being looped, that kind of ties back into that provision. Private wells can kind of impact some of that as well. Summer water use tied to irrigation. We did add something that wasn't in here previously about acknowledging, PFAS and other contaminants that can be a potential risk to the city water supply. It's certainly an issue that we want to be aware of. And we also added something about unfunded mandates from federal and state regulations that can create funding difficulties, especially with some of the state taxation and revenue statutes that have recently been passed. Stepping through goals, really with all of these, we have something similar saying that, we need to, either complete the current update to the water facilities plan, which we're doing, but also continuing to stay on top of that and keeping an eye on what's out there as far as needs and if we need to update those plans again. Just looking at water conservation programs is an important aspect of that. Looping water lines and available when there's a situation that's available to do that.
PJ, when we're looking at water conservation programs, a couple questions for you there, if I may. One of the things I was thinking, I was just reading through this, I'm thinking of as the growth goes north, and I'm noticing there are large swaths of green grass being watered, and I'm just wondering if there would be an interest in a policy that also looks at xerophytic landscaping, or I'm just thinking as there's only so much water, and if we're thinking about growth, it will impact. I know we don't have a water issue now, but I'm just wondering if there's any conversation about that. Do we need it? It looks lovely in front of but it takes a lot of water, and I'm wondering if there are other ways to look lovely.
Is there anything that you had on that?
I mean, I think a lot of that conversation comes back to parks and some of the standards that we have set along that highway corridor, especially I think is what you're referring to. There are some private systems that utilize private wells, like Silverbrook, for example, waters a lot of their HOA areas with private wells, and we don't necessarily discourage that. We just have to have some controls in place for that. But again, it's not necessarily what you're talking about with Xeriscape. I think that would be a policy decision that would have to be made and then probably pass through the Parks Department on landscaping.
Right, and I would add to that we are looking at updating our landscaping ordinance and in conjunction with a couple landscape architects from the community, and some of that may be addressed in there as an option.
Okay, yeah, get her on that.
Yeah, that would be certainly a policy discussion. I will say that the council did make a pretty big decision. I believe it was the last water rate where they removed the irrigation rate. So basically you pay for what you use. So they decided to go that route because the city does like green lawns. It is an effort to beautify the corridor. Takes water, but that is the route the council's taken in the past. And they did remove, like I said, the irrigation rate, which was huge. So if they're watering, they're paying for it. So
that was part of that was water conservation encouragement, because the people were getting a break on watering their lawns in the summertime.
Yeah, and for risk of bringing up the misinformation during the election campaign about my comments on this topic, But I'm happy to clarify more, because in the past I did, propose, and I still support, having some standards, landscaping standards for commercial properties, new commercial properties that are coming into the city as new developments, that we look at, making sure that we aren't doing water intensive landscaping, that we have more water conservation minded landscaping rules. So I would support exploring that in the future. But on this land use plan specifically, I did note that on that number 4, where we talk about implement water conservation programs, but we don't have anything tied to that in the policies or recommendations below that kind of feed off of that. And I think it'd be nice to have under recommendations something about exploring water conservation opportunities or efforts or policies. Incentives. Yeah, just a bullet point on a recommendation that we tie to that number 4 that says we're going to actually look at that and see what we can do.
Okay. Yeah, stepping down into policies here, kind of read through those there. It's, I guess one point is whether it's water or sewer or any other services, we do require annexation into the city of Kalispell when you extend into an area. Discouraging use of individual wells. And again, monitoring and updating the extension of services plan and the facility capital improvement plan as necessary. The next one is, running into sewer.
Just to go back to water real quick. One question I had, this was suggested to me, and I thought it was an interesting idea. Just when we talk about shallow groundwater, areas of shallow groundwater, and if we have like gas stations or stuff that have underground tanks that might leak. I mean, obviously we're on sewer systems, so we don't have to worry about septics, but any kind of like commercial activity that has like an underground tank that might leak or something like that, do we want to look at, because we have some areas that are shallow groundwater, the risk to our water supply of contamination if we're putting something that potentially could leak and cause pollutants in an area with shallow groundwater.
I think it certainly can be a concern. I think that DEQ has the regulations that address that, so I don't know that we would necessarily want to duplicate that. I don't know that we could do anything different anyway than what DEQ does. So that'd probably be my main answer to that, is I don't think that the city has any specific rules on that because it's a state regulation.
Do they limit it? And I'm not familiar what DEQ's rules are.
They certainly have standards as far as I'm not really super familiar with them, but I do know that they have standards about the tanks and different things that are designed around limiting the risk, minimizing the risk of having spills that would come out there. And certainly the city, in terms of stuff that's already out there, through our Brownsfield program, try to get remediation efforts out there when something's being redeveloped in a Brownsfield setting.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if DEQ limits, so they certainly regulate that industry and the tanks and the tank construction and stuff. I'm not sure if they look at groundwater or not. So that would be, I guess, a question if the council wanted us to look into that. The other option then would be, if the council wanted, is if you were in a high groundwater area, that you shouldn't allow those types of uses. So that would be the other option. So I guess the question would be, does DEQ regulate it? And if they didn't, then is that something that you would just essentially say any high groundwater areas shouldn't be used for commercial purposes or whatever it may be? That would be more of a general policy statement. So I guess that.
How would one define high groundwater level? I mean, that would be a whole other.
I mean, we have maps. We generally know where high groundwater is. We require geotechnical reports and stuff. But yeah, we're getting into a bit of micromanagement that we don't usually get into, for sure. So there would have to be quite a bit of research and analysis and studying that would go into that and determine, I guess, where that would be applicable, and that if that was something the council would want to warrant or not.
I mean, part of it might be a question of despite DEQ rule. I mean, I agree that I don't think DEQ looks at groundwater level. They just regulate generally, these buried tanks. But a question would be, how often, despite these regulations, do these things leak? And, do we see problems in areas of shallow groundwater if they do leak? Is there like statewide data on that? And just knowing, is this a problem? If, in the last 50 years, there's never really been an issue of these leaking in shallow groundwater and contaminating the water, then maybe it's not something we need to worry about. But if it's, I don't really know. It's a question though, because I could see it being a problem.
I feel like the potential problem from that is pretty catastrophic. If it, contamination of our drinking water by, some kind of chemical of unknown origin or whatever is pretty severe. I also hesitate to micromanage what people can do, but I mean, if our aquifer is 10 feet under the ground, maybe, no burying chemical tanks under there, kind of a thing.
If I could interject, our water source doesn't come from the shallow aquifer, so that I think that's what a lot of this discussion is about, what might be leaking in the shallow aquifer. And there are certainly, especially in the county, some shallow water wells. But our water sources are coming, I mean, the new wells that we're drilling are 450 feet deep. They're in the deep alluvial aquifer. So we do have some layers of protection there between the different aquifers, just as a reference point.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. There is, though, a connection between shallow groundwater and the Flathead River and Flathead Lake in terms of water quality. So
Yeah, I was thinking that also flora and fauna, it's not just us, right?
Yeah, not just us.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that also goes back to, we don't want to have another Potomac going on in the Flathead Valley into the lake, right? And I guess that would lead to my next question of, are we tracking this whole thing with the county health department, considering reducing yes.
we do have a representative on the health board. I don't know, I know they had a meeting. I don't know if they made the decision, but I certainly thought it'd be great for the council to weigh in, make sure our health board representative knows if we, as a council, have an opinion on that. I certainly do. Would be not to weaken these septic standards in the county and going backwards in terms of how that's regulated in terms of water quality and safety. It's a different agenda item, but do you have anything, William?
Well, we certainly threw here, and sewer is the next one on here, but the land use plan certainly encourages people to get on sewer, and we do that through, new development with density, but also wanting, if the septic fails, to try to get people onto that. And I think that's been a core part of our existing growth policy and the new land use plan.
Thank you.
So the city does have a representative on the health board. That would be, I guess, the easiest way for this to go. And our general policy, the city is, generally, there's a lot of county development that we're trying to get things on city sewer where we have a point source and to protect water quality. So certainly, to a certain extent, I think that's getting deep enough in the regulatory landscape that staff isn't going to be willing to write a letter and things to the county commissioners saying, don't approve that. Our policies, if they're in and around our growth boundary, we certainly would do that based off of our existing policies. But this is such a county-wide thing that it's not something staff was wanting to jump in on.
I get
But
it.
certainly, if council felt like they wanted to make some sort of general policy statement, certainly could. And
Health, how to do it, but I think it certainly kind of raised that flag to me of, almost felt like we're gonna unregulate backyard underground brown trout fisheries.
Yeah. So just to circle back on the shallow groundwater, I recognize that's a bigger discussion that we're not going to solve before we get this growth plan finished. Is it, because I think there might be some other topics that come up as we go through this where it's, we want to explore it. Is it worth a bullet point that just says explore possible other regulatory, protections or whatever for our shallow groundwater areas or something like
Yeah,
that.
there certainly can be something in place with that, so, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so sewer was the next section, and we kind of stepped over into that a little bit. But you can see up here with some of the issues, certainly the existing on-site sewage treatment, but also, groundwater infiltration and stormwater runoff that can get into the wastewater system, and the treatment plant can be an issue too. Again, stepping through a lot of this issues with septic systems, part of it is having areas that are on septic systems around the city kind of steer where your growth is, because there's no place for the city really to grow into areas that are fully developed with septic. But there's an acknowledgement in here about the water quality with the aquifer, rivers, lakes, including Flathead Lake. Discuss, or at least points out the Evergreen Sewer District that receives a portion of our wastewater treatment capacity. And again, the unfunded mandates that we talked about under the water section too. And similar to water, completing the update that's underway with the sanitary sewer and wastewater treatment plant, trying to get areas of the city currently using septic systems onto city sewer whenever possible. And as well as areas outside the city.
I think it's important to note, regarding when we put this in here about unfunded mandates, we're not necessarily saying the mandates are bad, but the reality is there's a cost associated with them that can sometimes be $20 million or so, and it's not an easy thing to overcome, especially in a short period of time, and it, in the end, it costs. So that's why councils are forced into these positions and have to make the decisions that sometimes, they don't have a lot of options,
So in terms of policies, number 3 really encapsulates a lot of that, where, sewer systems should be designed and constructed so that you have long-term resiliency, so that you can plug in to the existing and future plans for the system. Again, continuing studies of wastewater treatment collection facilities, the sanitary sewer facilities plan, monitoring those plans as we're moving forward.
So would this be where the biosolids would be included in that bullet, basically?
Yeah, the biosolids would be in the wastewater treatment portion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What specifically did you want us to
I'm
address
just thinking, I'm just recently on the solid waste board, and I'm just learning about the situation with the biosolids and recognizing that if we can't get the 18% water, we're in a pickle, actually. And so I'm wondering if that needs to be more specifically stated, or if this is general enough that we're okay. It's a big pickle. Yeah. It's more than a pickle, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of that will be alleviated with the plant that's going in though, right?
We don't have access.
I mean, you know more than I do now that you're on that board.
Yeah. Yeah.
Won't that alleviate
We could probably add it.
some of that?
So you'd have something. Yeah. Are you referring to the Summers plant, or are you the ones that we were going to put?
It's no longer
No.
what it was. Yeah.
Is it? Oh,
So, yeah, we're,
oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
I've been
we can
on
add
vacation.
something in there. It certainly is. I think when a lot of this was being drafted, some of this wasn't out there, so certainly. we'll
Right.
be
You were
able to add
planning on
some-
exactly what Jen was saying. Yeah.
something to add,
Yeah.
add into that. But the biosolids currently go to the landfill. The plan is for them to continue to do so. There's a project that's being constructed as we speak that would dry the biosolids to the point where we should continue to bring it to the landfill. But until it's done, we don't know exactly where we're at. So stay tuned on that one.
Right. And then there's the whole composting facility, and if we need that, and so yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll add a bullet point on that.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. Just throwing a small wrench at 9:20 in the site.
Next section was stormwater. One of the significant issues with stormwater is that through most of the planning jurisdiction, there isn't any public stormwater. And that's true to some extent through the city, where there's a lot of private facilities that are out there. But certainly out in the outlying areas, you don't have a lot of public systems that would be in place for that. And that's can be especially an issue where areas are prone to flooding and so forth. One of the things that's, I don't know if it's really an issue per se, but we are regulated municipal systems. We have the MS4 permits. There's a number of things that we really have to do in the city that maybe the county doesn't have to do. And so you can see some differences as we hit city limits lines between how we approach something and how the county might approach something. And so that's certainly an issue, having that interface the same way it is with sidewalks or anything else. They are working on that stormwater facility plan, so you can kind of see kind of a common theme running through all of these. But we certainly want new development or redevelopment to pay attention to water, stormwater management, facilities, making sure that that's all addressed under newer standards that are out there. And that applies to city streets that are being constructed, as well as sites that are being developed. Again, recommendations, that update to the facilities plan, continuing to monitor that, improve storm drainage as we're doing street reconstruction, which is certainly something that's on Public Works agenda that's out there. And that brings us down to solid waste management. One thing we did put in here is as far as issues, there's limited opportunities for recycling, and so it's reflected down below in trying to encourage alternative methods of that. Out-of-city residents often bring garbage in and place them in city dumpsters, which impacts what our capacity is. But as far as goals, we did want to expand recycling efforts in a cost-effective way to reduce tonnage at the landfill. Trying to reduce waste.
Could I stop you there? Just again, I'm all into my solid waste space. And I'm wondering, in terms of expand recycling efforts, I know I've gotten a lot of, we had some public comment from it, and I've heard it as well. Is that an area where we would want maybe some more language in terms of what that means to expand recycling? Because we just said above that it was difficult to do, but we wanted to expand it into what extent are we looking at? And I know with the biosolid situation,
Right.
This
Right.
gets tricky, right? Because I realize that's priority number one, and we're nowhere near having resolved that yet. But on the other hand, this could also reduce some of the biosolids going potentially, not through biosolids reduction, because that's sewage, but in terms of other waste going to the landfill.
Right. And I would say, in here, one thing we intentionally put in there was a cost-effective way too, because you want it to make sense out there in the community is what's going on, because sometimes that's the downfall of some of those programs is that they're not, the cost benefit analysis is out there. One other point with some of that too is that, keeping in mind that what the land use plan is kind of setting that foundation to come forward. So, if it's something that later on this year or next year or something that we really saw a recycling program as being beneficial to the city, being able to point back to something here in the goals is important. You don't need to formulate that plan or know exactly what we want to do as part of the land use plan.
And I think that's where, again, kind of with the previous comment about the shallow groundwater under recommendations to tie it back to something to say, because I remember conversation with previous council, we had a big conversation about recycling and all the limitations, the complications of being able to implement that due to costs and complexity and that sort of thing. So just under recommendations, having a bullet point that says continue to explore ways to implement a local cost-effective recycling program, something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't have the answer, but we have it out there as something we want to continue to, be open to and explore.
I guess my only comment is recycling is doing a lot of work right there, because there's a lot of different forms of recycling, between food waste to metals and glass. I mean, I do wonder if there's a way just to broaden the types of recycling, or just even say that somewhere there, because I think there's some successes like on food waste, and that might be more successful than trying to address things like glass or aluminum. And I feel like when we lump all that into one recycling idea, then we're all of a sudden we're forgetting that there's multiple strategies, because I've seen a lot of strategies about food waste reduction, which would be really beneficial to Ms. Blank's new work. Whereas there are some recycling programs that are really cost prohibitive and always would be because of just where you'd have to take aluminum. So
Yeah, I think we should definitely.
So I just wonder there if like a broader term or types of recycling instead of just saying a recycling program or types of recycling programs. But,
Yeah, we can come up
but
with
again,
some
I'm not
Well,
sure
it's-
that
it doesn't
this
have to
is
be all or
exactly where
not.
we solve the problem.
Right now, it's all or nothing. There may be like you said, there could be an in between there. That is financially feasible earlier rather than later.
So yeah, we can add some language in on there, and you can see in the recommendations, certainly want to expand services into new areas and monitor that plan as we move forward. Transportation, and again, there's a pretty significant transportation plan that's out there that would have a lot more detail than what's in here. Some of what we call out as issues are really just kind of acknowledging what's out there as far as overall traffic volumes that have increased. I think everybody has seen that and recognized that. And some of the things that are out there in terms of the infrastructure can certainly be improved on in terms of updating for safety issues or ADA ramps or whatever the case may be. And I think Public Works tries to do that whenever they can.
PJ, good. The item number 3, in terms of the reference to the gridded interconnected street system, I certainly appreciate that and recognize the value of a grid system, but I don't see that actually in any of our standards, because I know, we have, I guess it's somewhat there, but we see a lot of developments that come forward and they have the cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets and looped roads, but it's not a grid. And so I'm just curious about that. I was actually somewhat surprised to see it there, because so many of the projects that come forward aren't grids. In fact, almost none of them are of true grid. And so do we have standards or do we need standards to say, developments that are coming in need to be true grids rather than?
Yeah, so our subdivision regs, they don't call it like a literal true grid pattern like a waffle or something like that, but it's, we have standards where block lengths aren't supposed to be less than, I think, 250 or more than 600 feet. You certainly have situations where, based on topography or existing development around it, that you have to do a cul-de-sac in a situation just because there's nothing to tie into. We do provide for future road reserves to make those connections from one subdivision to another, one development to another. So we really do have that standard in there. But when you get down to any given site and trying to work around the specifics of the site, you usually see that massaged a little bit as you're coming forward. But the general policy of having interconnected transportation networks is something that we do carry through on all of our subdivisions.
I would add into our transportation plan does, on a kind of a macro level, look at a grid system for our different classifications of roadways. And so we don't get into the details maybe on the local street sections, but we do look at collectors and arterials and where they need to be to serve the overall grid. That would be the overall transportation plan. So we have those kind of placeholders in place when new developments come in, and we could say, hey, we need to account for a collector in this area because we need to be able to connect from here to there. So there is that kind of mechanism in our transportation plan.
But I see that as somewhat contradictory, because my understanding of the value of the grid system is that you then are not creating a branch system where you're funneling traffic to collectors and arterials, because you have a grid where there's so many different options that are kind of equal in being able to have that carrying of traffic. And so I understand that our regulations do provide for the connections, but it's usually, it's 2 connections out to the main road, the arterial, and then, oftentimes only 1 connection to a potential future subdivision next door, whereas, embracing kind of the values of the benefits of what I understand why grid systems are promoted would be that you would have, multiple connections. Basically, every street network would go through and kind of connect to the adjacent properties. And I'm not seeing that in our standards or in what we see coming forward. So I guess I understand that topography wise, sometimes it just doesn't work, but it's also, if you do a true grid system, developers don't like it because they could put a lot, house lot on where that road would go. So it does reduce the number of lots in a system. So there's a trade-off between, better transportation, and the number of housing lots in the development. And so I'm torn a little bit coming from the housing side of you want, to maximize that housing, but at the same time recognize that in the planning world, they do say the best system for transportation network is the grid network, and I'm not seeing enough of the grid pattern in our new developments.
Well, the good thing is the policies there you like. So what we could do in the future is we could show you how it's been implemented for sure, and because there's a grid being created to the extent we can. I will say that this requirement actually costs a lot of money too. There's nothing more expensive than a city street. So if our requirement is you have to have essentially a block face every 600 feet, you're taking away lots, but now you're actually requiring a lot of street and a lot of street frontage, which then is also
Always going to be a challenge. It does, except for this year.
Probably going to be a challenge.
We do call out an issue about needing, more comprehensive pedestrian bike travel plan. That's something that I think we've made strides towards over the years. There's a few specific things as far as some segments of roads called out here.
Can we stop at number 10 and chat through that? Two things come up for me. I know a lot of people spoke strongly about this at the time when the woodland traffic in that community was heard, and that was removed from the plan, and this one remains. And I just three things that come to mind. One, we're low on green space of this kind in the city, and to lose that to, I just would love to see this stay based on feedback I got from door knocking and just looking around the city. It's a priceless piece of ecological land, and we won't get anything like that back as we grow more and more. So there's that piece. We could have it as a pedestrian bike path and think about it differently. So it is a passageway. It's just not powered by cars. It's so I'm wondering if that's a possibility to talk that through a little more.
They don't have another way that's going back and forth there. A lot with this specific one, there's a lot of that roadway is already held in reserve to be a road through there.
Right, I'm just thinking New York City has Central Park, and everyone loves that space, and if it hadn't been saved, it would feel very differently. We'd have great roadways, but we wouldn't have this central third space that we haven't really thought about for that area, and it would be a really, particularly with the college there, it'd be a way to leverage some areas and then connect the downtown to that area in ways that don't require getting in a car.
Yeah, and yeah, like I said, things are always something that you can talk about with that. I would say that, in the past, the fire department has looked at that too. There was a master's thesis that was done about the ISO ratings, and so there's public safety concerns that come with that too.
Though we could build public safety features in those neighborhoods, right? I know, PJ, so, it's late, but
there's a lot of issues, not benefits to that connection that would be there, and
so it's a council decision. It's in there. Council can choose to remove it. It was talked about at length during the Main Street Safety Action Plan as well. So yes, it's integral to the transport as far as traffic growth. It's actually integral connection even for downtown when you look at the traffic flows, because Evergreen can then get directly to the bypass. So there's a lot of if then that, so it's there for a reason, but it's also could not be there for a reason, right? So that's purely a council policy decision. I'll say there's no funding for it anywhere anytime soon. So, sure. But certainly it's a council discussion to be had. But it's there because it's been there since the 70s.
I've made my views known on this in the past. I share Mrs. Blank's Blank's thoughts on this, so I won't get into that.
I'm torn. Like, I get it. I want to keep our rivers and our parks and our stuff as much as we can, but man, we need to connect the city across the river, and we just don't have enough connections getting, the east and west side of the city together, and we've just got to get them connected. And if we can do it better, if we can, the minimal impact, and we can preserve that as much as we can into a park, area with a bridge, maybe an aesthetically pleasing transportation. Again, we're talking expensive money, right? But we got to connect this two sides of the city. We're creating so much traffic.
Well, but we did prioritize not having traffic on the east side, right, in some of those wealthier neighborhoods. So I'm just suggesting that we have made choices, and that this could also be a choice, right, in terms of how fast do we need to get somewhere. There are other ways of thinking about this in terms of health and wellness of a community. People move here because there's open space, but we're quickly losing it. This is one way to keep it, is to take the open space that we have and highly prioritize. And I hear what you're saying. If we could put in here something that says, figure out a way to make this road so it doesn't disrupt ecosystems that are valuable and already present. Is that possible? Maybe, I don't know. But I guess I just wanted to hear what the council thought in terms of those thoughts.
I would just, to quickly before jump in, just highlight that a bicycle pedestrian connection is a connection.
Yep.
So, and I think it gets discounted that, it won't provide, there's a lot of people that will use a bike and walk for that connection if it's provided. And it's a good space, and it could actually relieve a lot of that traffic. You'd be surprised, I think, how much that would be effective, I think, but.
I know the historical issues. I guess the way I see it is, if you're able to put a road through, you sometimes then are banking the bike and pedestrian. You could actually create the access. I mean, if in there by doing it, so. I understand the larger issue that if they're also just from talking with firefighters and stuff like that, that if there's ever a large accident on reserve, then you really have a hard way getting emergency response, and having another alternate is a pressure in the system. But to me, I guess what I see is maybe there is a way to have the road that actually opens up the space, because that right now, that open space that's right there behind the college is really inaccessible and unknown. And I think that the transportation system through there could open that up, but also could actually really open up a really, like you say, a central park for what's in the middle of Kalispell. So
Possible to put language in there that prioritizes that? Because right now it's the primary goal is get people through. Instead, could it be a balance of maintaining the ecosystem values as best as possible, as well as addressing that?
You could, I mean, what I would note here is this is really just calling out the issue that there isn't the east-west connection. And that's really all this says with this particular one. It doesn't get into any judgments about the specifics on that. But
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking, is can we put a value on it?
So, well, you can, but I guess what I was getting at was how we structure these is this is calling out an issue, and the issue is there isn't that connection there. So it's not necessarily in that particular area. What we did put in, when you go down to goals, was provide a transportation connection, which is broad enough to be pedestrian or otherwise. It leaves it kind of open.
Could we put that in parentheses? Could be pedestrian, or just to give that option?
Well, I think specifically policy 10 is calling for the supporting of creating this specific arterial.
Well, up here it's under issues, so
I understand, but then if we go down to policy 10, that is the implementation of that issue.
Yeah.
Add something there in the lines of any such development should take into consideration the ecological significance of the area, or something along those lines to highlight that.
As well as advancing pedestrian and bike connections. I mean, I'm with Ren. I lived in China for over a year, and boy, they don't have a problem traveling long distances by bike. And we've got e-bikes. There are other ways to get around, right? Besides car. And this is prioritizing car. And I get the fire traffic, but again, I think if we were creative, we could think about that as well.
Yeah, as Jared said, I mean, we can certainly put something in there about that, so.
I'd sure appreciate it.
Yep. Let's see, where was it at up here?
I'm sorry, I've got to run and pick up my wife and daughter, so, but I will stand that I would like to see a road through there just because of the emergency services aspect of it. Not just fire and EMS, but law enforcement. So, just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. I think.
New chairs.
Just to, as we have our second member stepping out, and we're getting late, just to, for scheduling or timing here, I know we had plans for 2 chapters tonight, but maybe just do this one, finish up on this one.
Yeah, we'll see where we're at when we get up to it, whatever you guys want to do, so. But yeah, stepping down through here again, I mean, it's, you know, in a similar way, Woodland Avenue and 7th not connecting, that's been in there for a long time. You know, of the 145 miles of roads, there's certainly some maintenance issues that we need to do that kind of rolls into some of the improvement plans that Public Works has. You know, you're getting into goals. You know, number 1 is pretty all-encompassing, I guess, safe, efficient, accessible, cost-effective transportation system. Does look at a complete streets approach. Wanting a financially sustainable transportation plan is certainly critical. And that's where we just kind of talked a little bit about that transportation connection.
Could I, just on goals, this was a point that I wanted to make with or I was trying to make with the transportation plan years ago, but just a recognition that development patterns have a big impact on transportation, and having a goal that talks about needing development patterns that reduce sprawl and therefore have an impact ultimately on congestion, and also how like zoning and segregation and zoning affects transportation. You know, just trying to highlight the fact that development patterns and how our zoning on use segregation impacts ultimately transportation as well, and having to, you know, wanting to orient we talk about kind of mixed use and those clusters of commercial zones that are near neighborhoods and that sort of thing. Just kind of some sort of goal recognizing that's part of that's part of transportation planning as well, and transportation needs.
Okay. Stepping into policies, you know, kind of mentioned the complete street approach, you know, coordinating land use, and I guess this kind of touches in a little bit with what the mayor was just talking about, coordinating land use and transportation. You can kind of read through some of those. And again, 9 and 10 were kind of just a couple of those specific areas with that Woodland connection, and then the connection from Grandview.
But that's where it could be pedestrian and bikeway and roadway, because right now you just have the pedestrian in the Woodland, but 10 doesn't speak to that, so it would be nice to have some
Adding
value
it as
there.
an option with that, yeah.
Because that neighborhood would appreciate it as well.
Yeah. You know, number 13 was really calling out a lot of the things that were in the transportation plan. As it was called out, you know, before, the transportation plan has a lot of these details that are in it that are kind of restated through here. Similar to the other facilities plans, you know, needing to review and update that Move 2040 transportation plan is necessary. Certainly exploring alternate funding sources and methods of doing that. A number of places in here, again, we talked about comprehensive pedestrian bike systems being important for the community. Comprehensive management or pavement management system. That kind of ties back to where we're looking at the 145 miles of roads and about 35% or so that could use some upgrades with that.
Could we either an additional bullet point under policies or maybe adding to number 4, but talking about public transportation and supporting public transportation system.
Yeah, there's a bullet point under the issues, but kind of expanding that into the
As a policy.
policies or recommendations would be something to look at, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So then that stepped us into education, and similar to the healthcare, it's not our system, so we don't really have a plan per se with the city. But we did meet with the different school districts around here. School funding formula is certainly a challenge for them. Not a lot that we can really do with that. But historically, lack of voter support has kind of played into that as well. Looking at goals, one thing that the city can do is to continue to foster relationships with the school system, encourage the school systems to prepare for growth. We've done that a number of times over the last 5-6 years. We'll meet with the school district and kind of show them what we see as far as directions of growth, where different subdivisions are happening, to kind of help them plan and prepare a little bit for what their needs might be.
One thing that I would encourage for a bullet point under recommendations, and it was mentioned in the Parks Plan in terms of what was called the Spokane model, but to explore opportunities for park-adjacent facilities when new school developments are being built.
Okay. Yeah, that. Coordinated facilities. That steps into parks and recreation. As we mentioned, that they're working on a new parks plan that we would adopt, incorporate by reference as we would with the public works facilities plans. As far as issues, historically they've had, it's expensive to maintain the parks, and so funding to make sure that those parks are taken care of. Even though trails consistently are high in community surveys, I think they saw that in the parks plan. We certainly saw that with the public outreach that we did with the land use plan. Funding to maintain that is always going to be somewhat of a challenge. Year-round public indoor space is something that's important in a climate like we have here, and trying to improve our situation with that. The Parks Volunteer Program, to try to leverage some of that. They do get quite a bit of help from the community, but can certainly use more of that. So as far as recommendations, there was some talk about potentially establishing a park renovation fund to make sure that they're conducted on time to prevent major deterioration and kind of maintain those assets that we have. Certainly be something that council can look at in the future. Enhance and develop park and recreation volunteer program, but investing in current and future needs, and then as with the other ones, monitoring and updating the plan as necessary.
I'd say on recommendations, just try and tie it to some of our discussion with the parks plan, but specifically the woodland fishing pond has been such a, I think, popular idea that might be worth having a bullet point talking about pursuing that as a recommendation or goal, and then also. We talked about having kind of an equity of access, specifically a proposal for people to pay extra on registration fees to serve as scholarship for those who can't afford it. We don't have to talk about that specific policy, but just having kind of as a goal, equity of, pursuing equity of access to recreation opportunities in the community or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then as far as, I think certainly a broad statement as far as the equity of access. I don't know if council as a whole would want to have some of the specifics of the fishing pond in there, because that's why we incorporate it by reference, is developing that within the parks plan itself, and then it gets incorporated by reference here. So I don't know that you necessarily need to duplicate that, but certainly a broad policy statement about equity of access is certainly something that we could put in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so that kind of got us to the end of chapter 4. Is there anything that people wanted to talk about in general on chapter 4? If not, that brought us up to economic development. And as you mentioned, you know, it was getting late. I'm happy to stay. I'm a night owl, so I'll keep going.
We appreciate your time.
I think we did 3 last time
Yes.
when we were only gonna do 2,
Yes.
so now we do 1 tonight.
Every one of these helps us get to the end goal. So yes, certainly, this helps a lot. And then we'll have some more for you next week. So, yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right,
PJ,
thanks.
for taking us to that.
Yeah,
thanks,
sure.
PJ.
I think we went through the city manager report and council reports previous session, right? Anybody have anything else they want to add? Nope. Okay, we're adjourned.